The call from Poppy's school came just after the lunch rush in the office. I slipped into the hallway, pressing the phone to my ear as the receptionist explained that Poppy had a fever and needed to be picked up. My chest tightened. I was exactly 30 minutes from the school, and the meeting behind me was already delayed, so I called the one person who lived close to the campus. "Mom, can you pick her up? I can be there soon after." Elaine did not hesitate. "I am not your backup plan. Briar." Her voice was clipped, polished, the same tone she used when correcting me as a child. Before I could say another word, the line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long second, then grabbed my coat and keys and ran. By the time I reached the school almost 50 minutes later, the rain had softened to a cold mist. Poppy sat under the overhang near the gym doors, her knees tucked into her jacket, hair damp, backpack clutched like a shield. She did not look surprised to see me. That hurt more than anything. "Hey, sweetheart," I whispered as I knelt beside her. "I'm here now." She nodded once. "Can we go home?" That was all she said. No tears, no complaints, just quiet exhaustion. I lifted her into the car, turned the heat high, and buckled her in. She leaned her head against the window, eyes half closed, trusting the world again, only because I had finally arrived. On the drive home, I tried to keep my breath steady. I could hear Elaine's voice echoing, sharp as winter glass. "Not your backup plan." It was the same old script, delivered without hesitation. And suddenly I could feel every year I had swallowed my own hurt just to keep the peace. Poppy coughed softly. I reached back and brushed her fingers. "I've got you," I said. "Always." My phone buzzed with a notification from the Family Afterlight channel, reminding listeners to share where they were tuning in from. I almost smiled at the timing. If anyone listening had ever held their child and wondered what breaking a generational cycle felt like, this was it. And if they were still here with me, hearing this part of the story, I wanted them to stay because what happened next changed everything. I pulled into our apartment lot, killed the engine, and let the silence settle. Not the kind that punished, the kind Elaine mastered. This was different, heavy, clear. A line had cracked, and I knew I would not be able to pretend it did not break. "Come on, sweetheart," I murmured. "Let's go home." That evening, after settling Poppy on the couch with a warm drink, I sat at the edge of her bed, folding the small pajamas she loved. The quiet pressed against me like a memory trying to surface. I had grown up in silence just like this, but it had never felt protective. It had felt like warning. My phone buzzed with a message from my father. "Your mother says she could not reach you. Call when you can." He never used exclamation marks, never raised his voice, never chose a side. His specialty was neutrality, polished over decades. I typed nothing back. When I was a child, Elaine would stand in the doorway of my room and say, "You are too dramatic. Briar, no one likes a girl who makes everything heavy." She believed feelings were spills that needed scrubbing. Richard would hover behind her, hands tucked in pockets, offering that soft, strained smile that meant, "Please do not make this worse." I learned that my emotions were landmines. I learned to stay small. Later that night, as Poppy drifted to sleep, she mumbled, "Grandma did not want to come. Did she?" My throat tightened. "She was busy," I said quietly. Poppy nodded, trusting the explanation because she was still young enough to believe adults told the truth. The weight of that trust sat on my chest long after she fell asleep. The next morning, Nora stopped by with a small bag of pastries. She was the closest thing Poppy had to an aunt, though she and I had only been friends for 3 years. "I saw your dad at the market yesterday," she said as she poured coffee into my mug. He looked worried about Mom's pride. I replied, "Not about Poppy." Nora hesitated, then spoke gently. "What did Elaine say to you this time?" I told her the sentence. "The refusal, the coldness." Nora shook her head slowly. a mixture of disbelief and anger tightening her jaw. "She lives 12 minutes away," she said. 12 minutes. Briar. "I know. And she left your daughter sitting in the cold." Nora stopped herself, lowering her voice as Poppy padded into the kitchen. "Hi, Miss Nora," Poppy said, rubbing her eyes. Nora softened instantly. "Morning, sweetheart. I brought you a chocolate croissant." Poppy brightened, and for a moment, the room felt lighter. But when she climbed into my lap and leaned her head on my shoulder, I felt Elaine's voice again in the back of my mind, sharp, dismissive, always ready to cut. "You cannot keep letting her decide who you get to be," Nora murmured when Poppy was distracted. "And you definitely cannot let her shape who Poppy becomes." I did not answer, but a fracture inside me widened, and something old began to shift. By the third day, my phone had turned into a buzzing, trembling thing on the counter. I let it ring until it stopped. Every vibration felt like someone knocking on a door I no longer lived behind. The first voicemail came from my aunt. "Briar, your mother says she cannot reach you. She is worried. Call her back." The second was from Jade Fenwick, my cousin, the perennial messenger for my mother's opinions. "Your mom said you hung up on her. She is really shaken. You know how sensitive she is." Sensitive? Elaine had never used that word for anyone except as an accusation. The third message, longer, came in Richard's soft, bending voice. "Your mother is upset. Honey, could you call her?" Even just for a minute, I set the phone face down. Later that afternoon, as I folded Poppy's blanket on the couch, Richard called again. I answered only because his persistence meant something had escalated. "Hi, Dad," he exhaled, relieved. "Thank you for picking up. Your mother has been beside herself." "I see. She said you were short with her." His voice wavered. "She feels pushed out." I closed my eyes. "She refused to pick up Poppy. She said she could not get away. You know your mother. She does not like being asked at the last minute." "Dad," I said quietly. Poppy was sick. A silence stretched thin between us. He finally said, "Your mother. She thinks you misinterpreted." "Did she mention Poppy at all?" Another silence, longer this time. "No," he admitted. "But she is trying. Briar. She wants you to talk to her. I am not ready." He swallowed audibly. "Then what should I tell her? I cannot tell you that." I said, "This is between me and her." After we hung up, I felt the familiar guilt clawing up my ribs. For years, I had been the emotional buffer, the interpreter, the peacekeeper. If Elaine was a storm, I had been the sandbag. But now the silence was mine. That evening, Nora stopped by again, leaning against the counter as I made tea. More calls, she asked. 3, 4. I lost count. "And you?" I did not respond. Nora studied me. "You are doing something she has never seen before. What is that refusing to bend?" The words settled into me like a new kind of gravity. Across the room, Poppy hummed to herself as she drew at the kitchen table. She looked small but steady, trusting the quiet. I turned my phone off completely, the final vibration dying in my palm. The silence did not frighten me. It steadied me. By Saturday afternoon, Poppy's fever had faded into the soft tiredness she always carried after being sick. She tugged on my sleeve and asked if we could get sprinkles for baking day at Nora's. It felt good to say yes to something simple. New Season's Market was crowded, carts clicking, voices low and familiar. I was comparing 2 brands of frosting when I heard my name sharp, startled, unmistakable. Briar Elaine stood at the end of the aisle, coat immaculate, hair pinned perfectly, as if the world still arranged itself around her preferences. Poppy looked up first. She gave a polite nod, but nothing more. No rush forward, no bright smile. Elaine's eyes flicked to Poppy. waiting for affection that did not come. "Sweetheart," she said, bending stiffly. "Come give Grandma a hug." Poppy pressed closer to my side and whispered, "Can I get the pink sprinkles instead?" I handed her the jar. "Of course." Elaine straightened slowly. The forced smile on her lips cracked like thin ice. "Why are you here?" she asked. "We're buying things for baking day," I said. "We're headed to Nora's." Her expression tightened at Nora's name, the way it always did when someone outside the family held influence over me. "Nora's," she repeated. "You would rather go there than come speak to your own mother." "I am not avoiding you," I said calmly. "I am doing what Poppy needs." Elaine stepped closer, lowering her voice. "This is childish. Briar." "Mom," I said. "Please stop." She blinked, unsettled by the tone I rarely used with her. "I could come with you," she offered abruptly. "I have not seen Poppy in days." "You are not invited," I said. The air shifted, her eyes widened as if I had slapped her. "Excuse me, you heard me." Elaine let out a breath, brittle and sharp. "You are being dramatic. Again. Twisting things. I was busy the other day. You know how much I have on my plate. You left my daughter waiting outside in the cold," I said. "There is nothing to twist." "I told you I was busy. You exaggerate everything." "No," I replied. I finally stopped minimizing everything. She stared at me, stunned. People passed behind her with carts, but she did not move. "I am your mother," she whispered. "You do not speak to me like that. I am Poppy's mother," I said, "and I will not let her feel small the way I did." Elaine's jaw trembled. "You are choosing outsiders over family. I am choosing what is safe." At that moment, Poppy tugged my hand. "Mom, can we go now? Nora's waiting." "We are leaving," I told her gently. Elaine's voice rose behind us, cracking under the weight of losing control. "Do not walk away from me, Briar." But I did. I walked straight out of the aisle, holding Poppy's hand, feeling her small fingers curl into mine with quiet trust. That was the moment the balance of power shifted, not with shouting, but with the simple act of not turning back. The envelope arrived on Monday morning, tucked between a grocery flyer and a dentist reminder. My name was written in the precise, looping script of my mother's generation, the kind used for wedding invitations and threats disguised as manners. I tore it open at the counter while Poppy colored at the kitchen table. The moment I saw the law firm's letterhead, my stomach tightened. I read the first line twice. My parents had updated their estate plans. I was no longer the executor. Jade Fenwick, of all people, had been appointed in my place. Poppy looked up. "What is it?" "Mom, just grown-up paperwork," I said, folding the page before she could see my face. A moment later, my phone buzzed. It was Jade. I let it ring once before answering. "Your parents wanted you to hear it officially," Jade said, her voice syrupy with false sympathy. "They felt you have been distant. It made sense to put someone more stable in charge." "Stable," I repeated quietly. "They tried calling you." She added, "You left them no choice." "There is always a choice," I said. Jade scoffed. "Briar, do not make this bigger than it is. You are speaking for them." I said, "Not to me." She paused, thrown off balance. "Well, they are doing what is best for the family." I almost laughed. "For the family?" I said. "Or for my mother's pride," Jade inhaled sharply. "They wanted you to know before someone else mentioned it." "I appreciate the warning," I replied, and hung up. Poppy returned to her drawing, humming softly. I stepped onto the balcony, the cold air cutting clean through my frustration. I held the letter over a small metal dish Nora had given me years ago. The flame caught quickly. The paper curled and darkened. shrinking into ash. For the first time, the act felt less like rebellion and more like release. The storm rolled in just after dusk, the kind that Portland earned a reputation for: wind that slapped the windows, rain that moved sideways, lights flickering as if deciding whether to stay. Poppy had fallen asleep early, curled near the couch with her stuffed fox pressed against her cheek. I was rinsing dishes when my phone buzzed on the counter. Dad lit the screen. I let it ring once, twice. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in the timing after days of silence made me swipe to answer. Briar Richards' voice was strained, thinner than usual. "Thank God, I have been calling. What is going on?" "It is your mother," he said quickly. She slipped on the driveway. The ice, she went down hard. My grip tightened on the sink. "Is she conscious?" Yes. She is awake. But her wrist, it is bad, and the power is out. The whole street is down. The ambulance said there might be a 2-hour delay, maybe longer. The hill is too slick. I cannot get the car out." I heard Elaine's voice in the background, sharp with pain, sharper with pride. "Do not make her come. She will use it against me." Richard lowered his tone. "We need help, honey. Please." I shut my eyes. For a moment, I saw Poppy under that overhang, knees pulled to her chest, breath fogging the cold air, waiting for someone who never came. I inhaled slowly. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "Dad, drive up here. Help me get her to the car. Or bring Poppy's old winter blankets. Anything. We are alone up here." The guilt tried to claw its way in old, obedient, familiar, but something heavier settled first: clarity. "You left my daughter in the cold," I said quietly. "You both did." That was a misunderstanding. He insisted. "Your mother explained. She refused." I cut in. "And you defended her." Richard's breath hitched. "Briar, please. This is not the time for anger. I am not angry." "Then why will you not help us?" I looked at the dark storm outside the window. The glass rattled. Poppy stirred in her sleep. Because every time she hurt me, I came running. Every time she dismissed me, I folded. And she learned nothing. She only took more. "Briar, you taught me how to stay quiet," I said softly. "Tonight, I am choosing silence for myself," he whispered. "She is scared. So was Poppy." A long, trembling pause stretched across the line. Then I said the only thing that felt honest. "No." I ended the call before he could beg again. The phone buzzed twice, 3 times, then went still. Poppy's breathing was soft behind me, steady and warm. The storm pressed against the windows, but inside our small home, the air felt clear. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the city washed and strangely bright. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Richard and 2 voicemails from Elaine, but I did not open either. Poppy padded into the kitchen in her socks, hair messy, cheeks still warm from sleep. "Is Miss Nora still taking us today?" she asked. "She is," I said. "Get your boots." When Nora arrived, she took one look at me and frowned. "They called you all night, didn't they?" "Most of it," I said. "And you did not answer. I did once." "That was enough." Nora nodded, something like respect tightening her expression. "Then today is about Poppy." At the Children's Museum, Poppy ran through the exhibits with the kind of joy that made her feel brand new. She tugged Nora toward the bubble room, pressed buttons on the water tables, laughed in a way she had not laughed since before the fever. Every now and then, she reached for my hand just to make sure I was watching. During lunch at a small diner near the museum, Nora slid into the booth beside me. "Your dad is going to try again," she said softly. "You know that. I know. And Elaine. She will not take lightly that you said no. I know that too." I said, but it had to happen. Nora studied me. You look different, lighter. I feel different. Across the booth. Poppy concentrated on her pancakes, humming quietly. When she dropped her fork, I picked it up and wiped it clean. She leaned against my arm, trusting the day, trusting me. Whatever comes next, Nora said. You did the right thing. I did not answer, but I watched Poppy smear syrup across her plate. Her shoulders relaxed, her eyes calm. She was not waiting for a storm to break. She was simply living. When we left the diner, Poppy reached up for both our hands. Nora took one, I took the other. And for a brief, steady moment, the world felt aligned safe, warm, exactly as it should be. The quiet was no longer something I feared. It was something I was finally learning how to keep. The next weekend, Poppy wanted to go to a craft fair in Hood River. Nora came along, her car steady on the winding roads. Poppy chattering in the back seat about the sparkly string she hoped to find. The air outside was sharp, winter still clinging to the edges of March. Poppy held up a roll of glitter thread at the fair. Can I get this one? Mom. Of course, I said, brushing a stray curl from her face. Nora smiled. She is finally herself again. She is. I agreed. The drive home was quiet. Poppy's humming drifting from the back seat as she twisted her new string into tiny braids. We were halfway down the highway when Nora leaned forward slightly. Briar, she murmured. Look, a black Lexus sat on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking through the fading light. My chest tightened as we approached. Even before I saw the license plate, I knew. Richard hunched over the steering wheel. Elaine leaned back in her seat, her wrist wrapped, her face pale with exhaustion. Poppy did not notice. She was still singing softly, bent over her colorful threads. Nora's voice lowered. Do you want me to pull over? I let the question hang. My hands tightened in my lap. Through the glass, I could see Richard arguing quietly with Elaine, both of them frayed at the edges, neither willing to yield even in discomfort. Briar, Nora said again, gentler this time. I watched the Lexus, watched the two people who had shaped every bruise on my childhood and every instinct in my adulthood. The storm from days ago had clearly taken its toll. They looked small, diminished in ways I had never imagined, but I remembered Poppy waiting outside her school, breath fogging the air, trusting someone who never came. That memory settled inside my chest, sharp and clear. No, I whispered. Keep going. Nora nodded once and passed the car, merging back into the lane. You are sure I am. Behind us. The blinking hazards faded into the distance. Poppy lifted her small braid proudly. Look, Mom, I made a tiny rope. I smiled, reaching back to squeeze her hand. It is beautiful. The weight in my chest eased, replaced by something steadier. Not triumph, not bitterness, just certainty. For the first time, I was choosing the child in my back seat over the ghosts in the rearview mirror. That night, after the long drive back from Hood River, Poppy curled up on the living room rug with her markers. I was cleaning up the kitchen when she patted in quietly and held something out to me. I made this, she said. It was a drawing of a green house with 3 stick figures, me, Poppy, and Nora, standing hand in hand. Poppy had drawn herself in the middle, smiling wide, the sun in the corner glowing over the 3 of us. It is beautiful, I said, kneeling beside her. Can we put it on the fridge? Of course. She climbed onto a chair and pressed it carefully to the magnet. As she hopped down, her expression changed soft, thinking, the way she looked when she was fitting pieces of a puzzle together. Mom? She asked. Yes, sweetheart. She twirled the glittery thread she had braided in the car, eyes lowered. Do I still have a grandma? The question struck harder than anything Elaine had said in weeks. Poppy was not angry. She was not sad. She simply wanted to understand the world as it was, not as I had tried to protect her from. I sat beside her on the rug, letting the quiet settle between us. "Yes," I said softly. "You still have a grandma. She does not come over," Poppy said. "And she did not help when I was sick." "No," I answered. "She did not." Poppy nodded slowly, absorbing that. Did she forget how to be nice? The innocence of it made something in my chest ache. "I think sometimes grown-ups forget things they should remember," I said. "But that does not mean they cannot learn again." Poppy leaned her head against my shoulder. "Maybe you can teach her." I exhaled, my throat tightening. "Maybe we can try." She brightened a little at that. "But only if we are safe." "Right. Only if we are safe," I promised. After she went to brush her teeth, I sat alone at the table, the drawing glowing softly from the fridge. I thought of Elaine's voice in the grocery aisle, the estate letter, the storm, the roadside car. I thought of every version of myself I had been for her, small, quiet, obedient, and the version Poppy needed me to be now. When Poppy returned in her pajamas, she climbed into my lap and curled into my chest. "Can we see her one day?" she asked. Just to check, I kissed the top of her head. "Yes," I whispered, "but we will do it our way." Later, after she fell asleep, I picked up my phone for the first time in days. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a strange tenderness. I typed, "Would you like to see Poppy next Sunday 1 hour? At the park." I added nothing more. No apology, no explanation. 3 minutes later, the screen lit up. Yes. I set the phone down gently. The old version of our family was gone, burned away like the estate letter. But something small, uncertain, and real was beginning in its place because Poppy had asked, and I had finally learned how to listen. The following Sunday arrived colder than expected, the kind of cold that sharpened your breath but kept the sky clear. Poppy wore her red coat and the tiny braided thread she had made at the fair, tucked safely around her wrist. When we reached the Riverside Park, she squeezed my hand once. A question without words. "I will be right here," I told her. Elaine and Richard sat on a bench near the swings. They looked smaller than I remembered, two people trying not to appear uncertain. Elaine's wrapped wrist rested in her lap. Richard kept his hands tucked into his coat pockets. Poppy approached them slowly. "Hi, Grandma." "Hi, Grandpa." Richard smiled in a soft, hopeful way. "It is good to see you, sweetheart." Elaine cleared her throat. "Hello? Poppy?" Her voice was careful, as if each word had to be measured before she released it. Poppy studied the swings behind them. "Grandma, will you push me?" Elaine looked at me, not Poppy, seeking permission she never used to believe she needed. I gave a small nod. She rose slowly and walked with Poppy toward the swings. The chain links rattled lightly as Poppy climbed onto the seat. Elaine placed her good hand on the back of the swing, pushing gently at first, then a little higher when Poppy called. "More." Grandma Richard moved to stand beside me. "Thank you for letting us come." I kept my eyes on Poppy. "This is for her." "I know," he said. "Your mother. She realizes things now. Realizing is different from changing." He nodded, accepting the truth instead of sidestepping it. "She is trying," he said quietly. "I am trying too," I replied. Elaine's face shifted every time the swing carried Poppy toward her, cautious, emotional, unsure. Poppy laughed, her boots tapping the dirt with each arc. For the first time, nothing between us felt forced. No one performed. No one pretended. After a while, Poppy hopped off the swing and ran toward the slide. "Grandma, look what I can do!" Elaine wiped her cheek quickly, as if she did not want anyone to see the shine in her eyes. She followed Poppy at a respectful distance, not reaching, not overstepping. Richard sighed beside me. "We are grateful," he said. I nodded. neither rejecting nor softening the words. "We will move slowly," I said. "Poppy sets the pace." "Yes," he said. "She should." For a moment, we stood in silence and honest silence, without obligation or weight. When it was time to leave, Elaine walked back with Poppy. "Thank you," she said softly. The words were uneven, fragile, but real. I nodded. "We will see how things go." Poppy slipped her hand into mine as we walked toward the car. "Mom," she whispered, "Grandma can push swings pretty good." I smiled. I noticed. That night, after Poppy fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter I did not plan to send. It spilled out of me slowly, steady as breath. "Mom, I am not erasing you. I am rewriting the way our story touches my daughter. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors. And they stay open only when kindness walks through." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside the small dish where the estate envelope had turned to ash. 2 endings. One beginning, on the fridge. Poppy's newest drawing hung crookedly, a green house with 5 figures now. Me, Poppy, Nora, and a little distance away, Elaine and Richard, drawn close enough to belong, but far enough not to crowd. If you are still here with me, listening to this chapter, tell me where you are listening from, and if you have ever had to build a new kind of family, one shaped by choice, not fear. I hope you share your story too.